I'm Greg Giuliano. I'm an executive coach, organizational change consultant, and author. I believe leaders have the power to shape the future and change people's lives. I also believe people who challenge the status quo and go beyond usual and ordinary are rare. They're willing to go to the edge and push farther, over and over again. When I find these ultra leaders, I love to talk with them. In each episode, I talk with ultra leaders to learn how they do what they do and how they keep growing as leaders. I promise you a full dose of ultra leadership from other ultra leaders just like you in every conversation. We're at the edge of another episode. Let's jump in. Welcome to another episode of Ultra Leadership. I'm Greg Giuliano. My guest today is Mike Cosgrave. Mike is Chief Operating Officer at Tria, the premier middle market IT and advisory services provider, delivering digital information solutions to civilian, defense, and intelligence agencies across the federal sector. He's a dynamic, strategic, growth-focused leader with a history of senior executive positions in private equity-backed, public, and investor-owned companies. Mike brings more than 25 years of professional experience to his role as Tria's COO. He's responsible for leading day-to-day administrative and operational functions across the enterprise, providing the leadership, management, and vision to optimize and operationalize best business practices, administrative and reporting procedures, and proper resource alignment to improve top and bottom line performance and meet strategic goals. Prior to joining Tria, Mike served as president and COO of Assel Info, LLC, a Devell company, as well as a partner at Guidehouse and COO of the Swift Group. He has also served in executive roles at CACI, 63 Systems, and Mantech International. He's a graduate of the American University with an MBA in IT management from George Mason University. Mike is also a veteran of the U.S. Navy, where he served as an officer. He's a native of Southern New Jersey, an avid Philly fan, and he enjoys spending time with his wife and two children. Welcome, Mike, to the program.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm glad you're here. I almost tripped over a little bit because I'm from Northern New Jersey, and I don't want us to get into a debate over Taylor ham or pork roll or Giants or Philly. So we'll keep it clean today for our friends listening in.
Okay,
but it's nice to talk to another Jersey guy. So I want to start out. We were talking before we came on the air. You have a lot of experience, in the military and in business, and thank you for your service. My dad was a Marine, great affinity for the Navy, so I thank you, appreciate that. But I want to, and a lot of our listeners are younger leaders, first-time people managers, and you have a tremendous amount of experience. So I'm wondering, when you sit down and talk with a younger leader, what's the advice that you share most often when you're sitting and talking with them?
One of the things, and it's counterintuitive, but I tell them, don't be afraid of failure. Don't be afraid to take risks, to take on opportunities or challenges that may seem a stretch. Don't be hesitant. If something feels like you're biting off more than you can chew, go for it anyway. And the reason I tell them that is that failure is temporary. You can even make the argument failure doesn't exist. Younger folks in the workplace, they have a long road ahead of them. And just because you may not achieve your goals early on, that's just a beginning chapter in your story, and you got a long way to go. So don't be afraid of failure. Don't not take on something because you just think you can't do it. Yeah, go for it. Do it.
Yeah. I mean, everything is learning, right?
That's correct. Yep. And great point. I don't even like the term failure, but I'll use it. Every failure will teach you something. And that's an easy thing to say. You hear that all the time. But it takes an effort to actually learn from it and think about it and be objective about it. And sometimes it takes time. But
yeah, and I agree with you. So failure may be too strong of a word there, because when we think of failure, we think of like a total collapse of something, like the end of the world. It could be as simple as you're in meetings and you say something and then afterwards you go, oh, I might have not have said that. I shouldn't have said it there. Or I didn't say something and I should have said something. Or I didn't act soon enough in terms of engaging with this team member or that team member or addressing this situation or that situation. And those are like, oh yeah, okay, next time, right? You make adjustments.
Yeah, hindsight's 2020.
Yeah.
You can always look back on something and say, I could have done it better. I do it all the time. Yeah, just move on. If there's something you need to address that you realize later, address it and move on.
Yeah. So learning from mistakes where, oh, I did something that I shouldn't have done, or I wish I hadn't done it that way, or I didn't take action and I wish I had. You're learning from those. You're 25 years into this and still going strong. So how do you keep learning and keep growing as a leader? What's your practice, as Stephen Covey would have said, keep the saw sharp?
Yep. I find the single most important factor in learning for me has been networking. I've been very fortunate to meet a lot of senior folks in the community, in the industry that I'm in, and actively engaging with them, making an effort over, every few months to go have lunch, go have coffee, to talk to them, and just keep those relationships up and run. If you have mentors, if they act as a mentor, but even if they don't, just talk about what's going on. And I always get good information from doing that. And that takes an active effort to keep your network going. But I find that to be absolutely critical. Plus, I'm interacting with others in industry. So that gives me an opportunity to find out what's going on, what new trends there are, and how some companies might be meeting challenges that I face. So that becomes critical to me. And there's also the usuals like reading. Okay, I never stop doing that. And, when interesting books come out, I'll certainly pick them up. And learning from my mistakes. Just to go back to our original point, that never stops. I make mistakes all the time, but I do try to think about what can I do differently? And I make a concerted effort and carry that forward.
So you mentioned reading. Is there a book that if somebody asks you, hey, Mike, what are you reading? You have a go-to book that you recommend?
For new people that come on board, I'm a big fan of The First 90 Days.
Yeah. It
just has a nice framework and structure to tackle any new job. So that'll be one that I might recommend, especially people who are coming into my organization. I'll let them know, hey, I'm going to want to see your thoughts and your plans at day 30 and, updates 60 and 90. And if you're not sure how to do that, here's a good book to go look at. I just actually finished one that I really enjoyed, and I'm still mulling over how I want to apply it because it was fantastic. How Big Things Get Done. By say his name wrong, but Ben Flyberg and Dan Gardner are the two authors. Really, really interesting book and an easy read. So lots of ideas that I can bring to my job. So I wholeheartedly recommend that one.
So you read something and it sparks something in you. So you grow and you think about how you can bring that to your organization. And that means bringing some change to your organization.
Oh, yeah.
And so it might be a small thing, or it might be a larger thing that, it's time because of how we want to go to market or what we want to accomplish. It's time to change our structure or put in some new systems, processes, or ask our people to be able to do different things. So I'm curious how you go about the work of leading change in your organization.
Great question, one that every leader has to deal with. And that is something that just by nature of what I do in the industry is a constant. And so take a step back and talk about the last few jobs I had, including the one now. Typically, they're private equity backed. And the way that the companies are formed, this one included, is that they acquire companies, put them together, increase the enterprise value, and go forward. So they bring in a management team that may come from those original companies, but often will come from the outside. That's often the case I have, where I will come into these companies. And as you can imagine, there is a massive amount of change that needs to happen to make these previously standalone companies that are now part of a larger company function together. There's systemic challenges. There are process challenges. There are just people challenges, organizational. So there is always just a swirl of change and what I deal with on a daily basis and longer term. So how do I deal with it? Well, one is focusing on prioritization. What is the most important thing that I got to get done right off the bat? What are the priorities of the company? What are we trying to achieve? And then what can I do when I look at change management to get the company moving in that direction? So in my current company, to give an example, the focus walking in the door, even as COO, was for growth. Go out. I'm in the government contracting industry, win more contracts, to put it simply. And so that required changes in roles and responsibilities, people, systems, and just a complete mindset shift. And also the governance structure that we have, just the systems that we have to maintain it. There's a whole bunch of change. And it was a fairly major effort. But because that was a top priority, I jumped on that. And that was about the first 3-4 months of my job. So that's typically how I do it, or I try to do it. The struggle there is focus. There's a million things that need to change, and they pop up every day. There's always something that comes up. There's always something urgent, and keeping your eye on the ball is the hard part there. But once you get to a certain point and you're happy with it, then move on to the next thing. That's typically how I try to get things done.
So it's what Bill Bridges in his book Transitions talks about, the fact that change is an external event. You as the COO could say, oh, we need a new operating model. So therefore we need a new structure. So I'm going to announce an org change. And that's an external event. You can do that via email if you really wanted to. Then all these humans have to process that. And that's what he calls transition. And everybody does that in their own way and in their own time. So how do you and your leadership team, after you've created alignment, how do you help people along the path of understanding the what's and the whys of the change and the impact on teams? How do you bring people along after you've announced we're going to make this change? How do you help people with that transition?
Well, you start way before the change ever happens, right? The last thing I want is for those impacted to find out via email that someone's coming to really shake up.
There are some places that still do it that way,
No, not where I am. Good. So I spend a lot of time, and I go back to that growth example, teaching, explaining, this is why we need to change. This is how we're going to do it. And here's your roles. And this is what I need from you. What do you think? You think you can do, let me get your input. And I may use it, I may not, but I'll take the time to talk to those folks well in advance. And then if they're leaders, and they have teams under them, make sure that they understand it and can articulate it down to their teams, or I'll do it with them. And hopefully, if you do that right, you've laid the groundwork for change that's coming, and people aren't surprised. They get it.
Yeah, those conversations are critical, because as soon as I hear about something's going to change, in my head, I immediately vote, do I like it or do I not like it, right? And then I might think, oh, this will never work, right? So I get cynical. And then the irrational part of my brain is, oh, something terrible is going to happen if we do this. And so as a leader, what you're doing is taking the time to kind of like back people off the ledge that their brain can put them out on when they hear about an organizational change. And just, taking the time to connect with a human being. Here's what's changing. Here's why it's changing. Here's how we're going to do it. Here's the impact. Here's what's in it for you, right? So that becomes the work of change in my mind. And it's interesting to hear you describe it that way.
Yeah, I agree. Sometimes you can never get folks to come on board with the changes, and they may vote with their feet, and that's to be expected. That happens. But in my opinion, the last thing you want to do is surprise people with the change. You want it known well in advance and walk them through those stages you just described, right? Everyone has them like, whoa, things are fine here. Why are you changing it? This is going to mess things up for me. Walking them through it goes a long way towards getting the buy-in and acceptance of whatever change you're introducing.
Yeah, that's awesome. So in leading all these changes and the way that you're showing up as a leader, you're leaving a legacy with people. You finish a conversation, you finish a meeting. As you walk away, people have an impression of you. So I'm curious, What do you hope as you're leading in your organization and disrupting things from time to time because change is a constant? What do you hope that people are saying about you when you're not around? Because they talk about you when you're not around.
I'm sure you're right. I would hope they would say I was a decisive leader who spends the time teaching, who spends the time mentoring and teaching them why things are the way they are and why and what they're going to be, right? I think also, if I could throw one more in, and I think it's key to change, is that decisiveness. You can get into paralysis by analysis easy when you're doing big changes. Sometimes you have to think through it best you can and start down the path of a change. So I would hope that they would recognize that I'm decisive, but thoughtful, and that I spend the time mentoring and teaching.
Yeah, that's servant leadership. And it's really careful thinking, right? I want to hear it from everybody. I want to think it through really carefully. But at some point, you've got to make a decision and you've got to go because we got to keep things moving. Yeah. So how do you sometimes showing up that way? I want to be known as a decisive leader who helps and mentors people. Sometimes you don't get it right. And so how do you sometimes still get in your own way? Is there a habit that you continually work on? I got to do what I can to unfreeze that and shut that down. Is there some way that you still kind of trip yourself up from time to time?
Yeah, definitely one is at the top of the list for me, and that's focus. I wish I could say I was not easily distracted, but I'd be lying. If I have to really think through something, I need to turn off emails. I need to turn off my phone, chat. I need to push it all aside because I have a fairly open door policy. People do feel free to come in or text me or email me or whatever. And so I am easily knocked off center. And so I have to struggle, or I have to really focus on that. Otherwise, it's just easy for me to go in too many different directions.
Yeah, and you're not alone in that, right? Why I asked that question is because something that you mentioned is many people who are listening go, oh yeah, me too. And so hearing your techniques is important, right? So it's important to create space that sometimes as leaders, my job is just to think about things. I need to I need to be not just looking at today, I need to be looking ahead, and I need time and space to do that. And so knowing that, oh yeah, I get distracted, or people are coming in all the time, or for me, I'm addicted to my phone. So I have to silence my phone, put it on the other side of the room when I'm writing, especially when I'm coaching conversation with someone. So just knowing that and having those techniques of turn everything off for a while, having my assistant, really, help me with my calendar to create space so that I can be as focused as possible and doing the work that only I can do, right? That a lot of the times the lack of focus, and you tell me if this resonates, but a lot of times the lack of focus is I'm actually doing something that isn't even mine to do. It belongs to somebody who reports to me or somebody else on the team. And just because I'm not focused, I'm doing something. Wait, that's not even mine. Why am I spending time on that?
Yeah, that's something that everyone needs to be aware of. And it's easy to do, right? Especially as you move up through the ranks, right? Because you're going to have comfort zones, right? Stuff you've done in the past that you know how to do. And you can see someone in that role and you're like, here's how you do it. I can do it better. And let me show you how. And then the next thing you know, you've wasted a bunch of time when really you would have been better off delegating and
delegate and coach, right? Yeah, trusting our people, they know how to do that. Yeah, it's something that I know how to do. It's easy for me. I'll just do it. No, don't do it. Delegate it and coach them. That they can figure it out.
I think for younger leaders, and again, probably I say younger, probably the 25 to 35 range, that's going to be initially a bigger challenge than it is for me now, right? Because as you move up and take on bigger enterprises and bigger spans of control, you figure out pretty quickly you can't do it all. And so over time you learn, I got to take that step back and I have to trust leaders and, I have to be clear on what I need, trust them to do it, and really operate through your team as opposed to being the hands-on leader.
Yeah, and that's true even down to the front line, right? If you've been given the responsibility of taking care of a team, you have to trust that the team can deliver for you. And that's your number one priority, creating the conditions for those people to succeed at their unique mission inside the organization. And so your role is more complex and it's bigger in scope because of where you sit in the organization. But even the frontline leader, while they may not have the time to sit and think about things the way that you do, it's still the same. They've got to trust their team and set the vision, and then trust that the people on the team can deliver. So I always end my coaching conversations and the meetings that I facilitate with an expression of gratitude, because it's very good for our brains to hear gratitude and express gratitude. And so I want to end today same way. I want to say thank you to you for being with me today, for joining us on Ultra Leadership. I love these conversations. I really appreciate your time. I appreciate the wisdom and experience that you've shared with everybody. And so I want to give you the last word here and give you a chance. What are you grateful for today in the world?
Well, I'm certainly grateful for my family, my wife and my kids. I'm enormously grateful for the team that I work with. The current company that I'm at and the investors are a fantastic team. I'm very, very happy that I've landed in this place. It's been about 9 months. So a lot of appreciation and gratitude for that. Certainly, for my country and just the opportunities that it's provided me over the years. It's I feel very, very fortunate across those three things.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. Really appreciate you being here today. And thanks to you for listening. This has been another episode of Ultra Leadership. We hope you're enjoying the program. If you are, please write a review and tell your friends, like us, follow us on our YouTube channel, Ultra Leadership, and keep spreading the word. We're building a great community here, and we appreciate hearing from everybody about how they're enjoying the podcast. So until next time, that's all from me. And we will see you next time here on Ultra Leadership.
If you're enjoying Ultra Leadership, please take a minute and give us a review wherever you find your podcasts. And please stay in touch. Sign up for our Ultra Leadership newsletter at ultraleadership.com. Now, before you jump to your next meeting, I invite you to reflect on what you heard today. What stood out for you? What insight might you want to incorporate into your leadership practice? Until next time, remember, as a leader, you always have the power to shape the future and change lives. So go to the edge and push farther. Thanks for listening.
This is thepodcastfactory.com.